There, I'm making myself a co-host. Sarah Thomas. Okay, and the only other thing.
You want to hide all the non-video
Yeah.
participants? Yeah, try in video. Videos. No, sorry. Click up here on view. And you right click on it. Just right click on anybody. Right. Hide non-video participants.
Okay. Okay. We are good. Okay.
You want to leave this up? Because it's really.
No. Yep, everybody's here? Yep.
Good morning. Hi. My name is Jody Allen, and I'm an assistant professor of history here at William and Mary, and I'm the Robert Francis Ings Director of the Lemon Project, A Journey of Reconciliation. Before I go any further, I want to read two acknowledgement statements, and then we'll move forward. The first is the land acknowledgement statement. William and Mary acknowledges the indigenous peoples who are the original inhabitants of the lands our campus is on today. The Cherokees, Nottoway, the Chickahominy, the Eastern Chickahominy, the Mattaponi, the Monacan, the Nansemond, the Nottoway, the Pamunkey, and the Potomac, Upper Mattaponi and Rappahannock tribes, and pay our respect to their tribal members, past and present. The second is a statement acknowledging William and Mary's connection with enslavement. William and Mary acknowledges that from its founding, it depended on enslaved Africans and African Americans who built and maintained its now historic campus. Enslaved men, women, and children owned or rented by the university provided the necessities that made the daily lives of faculty, administrators, and students possible. The university benefited directly and indirectly from financing derived from the exploited labor of enslaved people for 172 years. Also, its faculty and students contributed to the development and perpetuation of pro-slavery ideology. The legacy of slavery persists today at William and Mary and continues to work towards racial equity, and as William and Mary continues to work towards racial equity and seeks to dismantle injustice on campus and in the surrounding communities. Okay. So I am so pleased to welcome you all here today, those of you in the room and those of you joining us on Zoom. This is our 12th Spring Symposium and our first hybrid symposium. As evidenced by the number of people registered and the number of people joining us virtually and the number of proposals received, we received the most proposals ever in 12 years this year. This year's theme, The Time Is Now, the lives of Black men, past, present, and future, spoke to you all. Being Black in the US is not easy. And being a Black man in the US comes with a set of challenges that sometimes are unimaginable. As a result, we decided that it was the time to take a closer look at those challenges and provide a space to begin discussions that we hope will go on beyond today. We hope that you will take what you learned this weekend with you to your homes, your neighborhoods, your places of worship, your schools, your barbershops, your hairdressers, wherever you find yourself, In short, take the ideas with you and spread the good word that you will get here this weekend. We hope that action plans are birthed that grow into lasting change for better. We hope, because without hope, there is no change. The time is now. So without further ado, and because the time is now, I turn the mic over to Dr. Hassan Johnson, the Lemon Project Mellon Fellow, and he will introduce our first moderator for the morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Allen, for that warm introduction. And it is a pleasure indeed to see everyone here this morning in person, as well as those who are joining us via Zoom. And I have the pleasure of introducing our moderator for this morning, Dr. Jamil K Donner. He is an associate professor of education with affiliations in American Studies, Asian Pacific Islander and American Studies, and the Center for Racial and Social Justice at William & Mary. Dr. Donner's work on race and inequality in education covers an array of topics, including critical race theory, school desegregation, intercollegiate athletics, and affirmative action in higher education. He has co-edited several books, including Scandals in College Sports, Legal, Ethical, and Policy Case Studies, Critical Race Theory in Education, All God's Children Got a Song, The Charter School Solution, Distinguishing Fact from Rhetoric, and the Resegregation of Schools, Race and Education in the 21st Century. Dr. Donnor has also served as a rebuttal expert in Clark v. State Public Charter School Authority. Dr. Donner's research has been published in Teachers College Record, Educational Policy, Race, Ethnicity, and Education, Peabody Journal of Education, the International Journal of Qualitative Studies, and the Journal of Urban Education. Dr. Donnor has been quoted in major media outlets on various critical topics in places such as media outlets such as the New York Times, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the Chronicle of Higher Education. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Donner to the platform. Let's give him a hand as he comes. All right.
Dr. Johnson, thank you for that, excuse me, gracious introduction. Good morning and welcome all to this plenary session. The time is now, the lives of Black men, past, present, and future. This opening plenary will kick off the two-day multidisciplinary conversation about Black men, past, present, and future. Panelists will bring various perspectives with backgrounds in Black male studies, psychology, and Africana studies. The speakers will present facts challenging enduring stereotypes that dehumanize Black men and boys, as well as offer insights on present inequities and discuss ways Black men are transforming themselves and their communities. Lastly, they will provide visions that improve the lives of Black males based on their areas of expertise. So that said, our first panelist is Dr. Daniel Black. He is a nationally renowned award-winning novelist. His works are inspired by African-American life, history, and heritage in the South, encompassing themes of race, religion, and sexuality. Upon graduation from Clark College, which is now Clark Atlanta University in Atlanta, in 1988, he was awarded a full fellowship at Temple University, where he earned a master's degree and a doctorate, both in African-American studies. Dr. Black also earned the prestigious Oxford Modern British Studies Fellowship, leading him to study at Oxford University. He studied under the great luminary Sonia Sanchez, who many consider to be the poet laureate of the Black arts movement. Dr. Black lives in Atlanta and is a professor of African-American studies at his alma mater, Clark Atlanta University, as well as at Morehouse College, where he has mentored burgeoning writers and scholars since 1993. Dr. Black is also the founder of Ndugu and Nziga, Rites of Passage Nation, a mentoring society that teaches character and the principles to African-American youth. Our next panelist is Dr. O'Shane Gadsen, who is an assistant professor at Norfolk State University in the Department of Psychology. His expertise includes psychological development of Black masculinity, relational psychoanalysis, non-traditional spiritual frameworks with oppressed populations, psychotherapy process and dynamics, self-reflexivity in clinical work. He teaches courses such as the psychology of Black masculinity, adolescent psychology, and African American psychology. His work has appeared in The Root, The Huffington Post, and BET.com. Our third panelist is Dr. Hassan Johnson, who is an associate professor of Africana Studies at Cal State Fresno. He founded numerous Fresno State programs, including the Africana Studies Online, Teleconference on Black Male Studies, the Onyx Black Male Film Festival, the Black Popular Culture Lecture Series, and Online Research Archive, the Onyx Black Male Collective, the annual Ash Sankofa Black Film Festival, the annual Africana Studies Black Gender Conference, the African American Edge Initiative, and the Africana Studies Black Elder Project, and the Hip Hop Research and Interview Project. So if you will allow me to set the stage for our conversation today. I want to begin with this text. The Man Not, Race, Class, Genre, and the Dilemmas of Black Manhood by Tommy J. Curry, in which he introduces the conceptual foundation for Black male studies by moving past gender theories that cast the Black male as pathological, aspiring patriarchs, by asserting that Black males occupy a specific genre, whereby their ontological starting point in Western civilization is non-human, which is a form of nihilism, as defined by Franz Fanon and Sylvia Wynter, respectively. According to Curry, the man not is the denial not only of Black manhood, but also of the possibility to be anything but an animal, the savage beast, outside of the civilizational accounts of gender. By using genre and not gender, Curry says that he is attempting to capture the reality of Black maleness in an anti-Black world. So my question for the panel is twofold. One, do you agree with Curry's assertion and theoretical project? And two, discuss how your respective work either coheres with Curry's work and or breaks new ground in Black male studies. Thank you.
Well, should I take that?
By all means.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming, but also thank you all for having me in this panel. That quote is a perfect quote to start the conversation. And I guess it's important for me to talk about my social and professional location and how I'm entering into this conversation in general, but also as a way to answer your question from my discipline. So I'm entering this conversation as a Black male, cisgendered, heterosexual male with an understanding and openness to the social constructivistic perspective of sexual identity and role identity. I'm also coming as a Black male psychologist from a long line of Black psychologists who have used and continue to use their intellectual prowess and their spirit to both work within the white epistemology of white mental health, while also working explicitly to dismantle its erroneous positionality and treatment of Black folks in the Americas in general, and of course, Black men specifically. So I'm coming to this work, and Tommy's quote is very powerful, because I do certainly agree with it, because I'm coming to my work as a heretic, and also utilizing a decolonialized heretical paradigm, and of course, hopefully praxis. And so I would agree with Tommy by firstly saying that Black males, from a developmental perspective, are not afforded the same privilege and space for what we might call or term normative psychological emotional development. And this is as a consequence of a number of systematic and ecological reasons. The perceptual impact of Blackness and maleness often creates circumstances which we have seen intergenerationally and currently that disallow for the ease and the freedom of making developmental milestones toward an integrated sense of self. Now, these ecological variables and systematic variables often start in the home or are manifested in the home: trauma, poverty, emotional distance of parents, the understanding or misunderstanding of the developmental needs of Black boys. Obviously in schools, low teacher expectations, behavioral punishment that shames and isolates, misdiagnoses of behavior, and of course, media representations and the psycho-spiritual internalization of all of that, from my perspective, sets up Black boys and men, because I believe that the socialization of gender is an ongoing process, regardless of the developmental age that a Black male finds himself in. But these things set us up for confusion, depression, anxiety, overcompensation. And I think what's important to note for me in relation to Tommy's quote is that my argument is that this depression or these behavioral manifestations or psychological manifestations or relational manifestations are not intrapsychically located, right? So when we think about the normative deficiency model paradigms that continue to explicitly and subtly find their way in theoretical paradigms, regardless of disciplines regarding Black boys and Black males, I'm repositioning the conversation and saying that these manifestations are not intrapsychically located, meaning it's not internally located. It's not by design of being Black and male, but as a function of the impact of these traumas that I've mentioned and other traumas that we can all name, and the impact of these traumas that are bidirectional and that are currently occurring on the psyche, and its impact in the ways in which Black males attempt to make meaning of those various complex ecological variables and traumas in terms of the way they attempt to cope and survive. And so my argument is, and I'll stop here, I have a lot more to say about this, but my argument is that development for Black boys and men, the ongoing development, is often an act of survival and is not does not allow us in many cases to have a reflexive, nuanced, developmental, emotional experience. And we've got to talk about that more deeply.
Who would like, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in there. I'd love to jump in there. This is Dr. Daniel Black. I'm at Clark Atlanta University, and I'm completely appreciating Dr. Gadsden's comments. Absolutely. I think I'd say something from a different vantage point, but we are certainly speaking the same sermon here, if you will. And that is, I think one of the things that's going to be really revolutionary about being Black and male in America is we have to explode what we mean by manhood. I think we need different notions of manhood, different kinds of masculinities. I think that we need to broaden what we understand and what Black men perpetuate as examples of manhood and masculinity. See, right now we're doing the kind and the respect thing, if you will, but I'm saying something a little differently. I think we need to have a broader notion of the kind of sons we want, the kinds of men we find necessary to follow. And I think it's just much too narrow. I think it's just much, much, much too narrow. I think we still have ancient notions of manhood and masculinity. You know, as I was preparing for today, I was thinking about Black men past. And I was thinking about the ways in which we arrived in this country as African men. And the notions of manhood, the notions of masculinity, the notions of virility, the notions of prowess that came with us. And I really believe that part of the issue with Black men in this country is that we traded some, not all, but we traded some of the beauty of that difference for what we thought was the prosperity of Western ideologies of manhood and masculinity. And I really believe that we need to get to the place whereby there are 17 different possibilities. There are 25 different possibilities of what manhood can actually look like. And to press ourselves to get to the place whereby we actually want sons who are not like us. We actually want sons who manifest a masculinity that traditionally we might even have despised or we might even have hated. And I believe that unless and until we do that, we will continue directly or indirectly, knowingly or unknowingly, perpetuating notions of masculinity that actually exclude large segments of our Black boys and Black men in terms of our contemporary population. And I'll stop there for a second.
Okay. I'd like to join in that. I appreciate the invitation. Thank you for having me, and it's good to be on this panel with some brothers that I look forward to exchanging with. In response to the question, I'm definitely in agreement with Dr. Curry's work. His text, "The Man Not," I think is both groundbreaking and appropriate for the onset of this field, which has been in a process of becoming for well over a century, but actually needed somebody to lay out the groundwork. And so when we start to talk about multiple masculinities, when we start to talk about how to conceptualize Black manhood outside of the dominant frameworks we've been given, it's important to not only have a text lay out the ideological groundwork for that possibility, but also demonstrate it. And Dr. Curry does this well. And one of the ways he does this is by shifting the framework to an empirical one. Now, this is important for Black men because we know, especially since slavery, we've been up against a series of stereotypes, frameworks, controlling images, whatever term you want to use, that shape the perception of Black men, not only in the larger society, but even within the Black community itself, even intra-racially. And so to be able to push back against that, we could do the same and just use opinion, personal anecdotes, so on and so forth, but it's far richer to be able to bring something tangible, not only in terms of data, but also in terms of an accurate historical reading, especially one that's based in the periods of time that we're reflecting upon. And Curry does this particularly well when he deals with the 19th century, early 20th century. This is important because it demonstrates that these Black men that we talk about so glibly in popular culture have been breaking ground for generations. This is not new. The depiction of Black men breaking ground is. And so that being said, one of the things I appreciate about the direction The Man Not takes us in is to explore the very ground by which we talk about these terms. What is manhood? What is the nationalistic ties it has to Western expansion? Where do these ideas come from? What role does early Western patriarchy and feminism and femininity play in the construction of Black men as children and then later as criminals? And so by excavating all of that, you know, Curry is laying out the foundation and demonstrating a method by which we can begin to tear these things apart. And so we can interrogate Black manhood from an entirely different standpoint, but one that is also rooted in some sense of what is actually going on the ground, which is something that I haven't seen a great deal of. And it's one of the things I appreciate. So I think it's appropriate that we start with this text as the beginning point of the conversation and look at how it actually does the work while at the same time inspiring us to find new ways to express that same sentiment. And I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you, panel members. Let me kind of pivot slightly to my next question for you all before I delve more into you all's own work. And so I want to pivot the conversation toward the role geography and location plays in the lives of Black males. So for example, in the minds of marginalized Black men, making sense of mobility, opportunity, and future life chances, Alfred Young Jr., in his ethnographic study of low-income African-American men in Chicago, writes that while Black men may appear to be of the same ilk and dispositions, when seen on the streets of Chicago, they in fact have a wide range of views and visions of how mobility operates in America, and it might operate for them in the future in Chicago. Can you discuss how geography and location informs your research, your respective research on Black men?
I can certainly jump in there. I think this is an important question. Part of my research on Black men specifically deals with Black men during the Middle Passage. And so when I think of location, it puts me in the center of the Atlantic Ocean. And I think this is extremely important because there are realities that happen to Black men and Black women too during the Middle Passage on those slave ships that absolutely shifted the ecological nature, both of African people and of the ocean itself, quite frankly, right? And the ways in which that boat trip, the horrors of that 6-month voyage across the Atlantic Ocean reshaped the consciousness in African people, even African men, particularly since we're talking about men today. And I'm thinking about particularly the ways in which African men in this place called the Atlantic Ocean were for the first time in their lives forced to deal with and to confront the notion that all the members of the family were on this boat. Black women were on the boat, Black children were on the boat, etc. But for the first time, they are not the caretakers of them. They are not the protectors of them. In fact, they cannot wield any particular kind of protection around any of them. And the horrors that incites in a Black male's psyche in terms of understanding who he is, his identity, his place in this thing called the African family, I think just absolutely cannot be underestimated. And I don't mean this in some patriarchal, overly protective way. I mean this in the sense of just the utility of his being, right? For the perpetuation of what he understands to be family. I think that's unbelievably important. This thing about ecology, right, and geography is so critically important because in so many instances, the Atlantic Ocean is also the place where the African becomes the African American, becomes the African Caribbean, right? Becomes the African Canadian. It is along those waters and in the middle of that waterway where what I call the great transformation occurs in terms of social identity. And that transformation means many, many, many things. And one of the things that it means is that now we are no longer the Fon, the Igbo, the Ewe, the Tiv, the Ga, the Serere, etc. We are now individuals who now have to decide, who will we be in a new world? Who will we be in a new land? And this question of identity construction, ironically, and I think Brother Gadsden was saying it earlier, it actually is still underway. We still cannot quite seem to agree completely and decide unanimously on who we are in this new land, in this new world, because we're always given identities instead of allow the opportunity to construct one for ourselves. And so I'm saying all of that simply to say, one of the things that's important is for us to go back to the water and to understand how our time and our place in the water was crucial in birthing a new identity that absolutely has everything to do with how we understand Black manhood and masculinity today.
To answer your question.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
To answer your question, wow, that's a good question. I think about my work for multiple ways because as I don't just position myself or haven't positioned myself as just a researcher or an academic, but I am also a clinician. And so that work has afforded me the opportunity to see Black masculinity ecologically, psychologically, in multiple ways and from multiple lenses. And so I think about my research, which has been thus far more quantitatively focused and moving more into qualitative work. And the studies in which I have conducted have been more national studies. And so the men in which have responded or participated in my studies have been from the United States, but from various locations within the United States. Developmentally, my research has more accurately focused on African-American adult men. Most recently, my study that's ongoing is more relational. So the men in which that are participants in this study that is focused on emotional intimacy and masculinity are men who are attempting to navigate romantic relational spaces and trying to make sense of it in terms of their own attachment styles, their own developmental subjectivities, and its impact on how they not only see themselves, but their capacity to tolerate the other, but also to be more, to be thoughtful about how others are perceiving them and that bidirectional impact and how that shows up in their romantic relationships. Clinically, I've had the privilege of treating patients, Black men, Black boys from a number of different geographical locations. When I was teaching at Morehouse in Atlanta, of course, I am from New York, so a lot of my practice for many years was in Brooklyn, New York, and currently I am in Washington, D.C. So many of the locations, as you can hear, are pretty multi-cultural, cultured cities, larger cities in the East Coast, Southern geographical locations. And what I'd like to say, I'll stop here, but I would like to say about my experiences, clinically at least, in seeing Black males across different geographical locations, is that regardless of the geographical location, regardless of the presenting issues, quote unquote, that these brothers bring into our work, there is a resounding similarity of anxiety, a resounding similarity of depression, a resounding similarity of anger, a resounding similarity of shame, that regardless of the geographical location, regardless of the educational background or other psychological identifiers or emotional identifiers or even cultural identifiers, where you think about it from an intersectional perspective, these Black brothers are all talking about in some form or the other about the impact of systemic trauma, systemic racism, and the intracultural dynamics that they have encountered as a consequence of relationships within their own cultural groups that they have grappled with. And all of them, and I say all of them, that probably is statistically inaccurate, but a large number of them all talk about the fact that they feel invisible and that they feel that there is no space to emote and to more deeply present the complexity of who they are. And so that's how I would answer your question.
Thank you.
Okay, well, one of the things that I think about in regard to this question of location, I think about it more in a contemporary sense, and also in terms of something Dr. Gadsden just mentioned in regard to invisibility. One of the things I've been doing in the last couple of years is taking my work outside of just the academy and engaging Black men, most particularly over social media, in ways that I couldn't do limited to my physical location, and started to engage in dialogue about what exactly would be useful in terms of bringing Black men together in one sense, but advocating in a structural way against some of the structural issues we grapple with. And so with an audience base of about 15,000, I put out a poll about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, asking the question of what types of policy would Black men like to see that actually advocate for them in particular. And this is pulling together Black men that may have been born within the US, may not have, but stand all over the world. So I've had Black men participate from Japan, from Australia, from the Caribbean, and all over the United States, and putting together a Black male political agenda. And so in terms of this question of geography and even ideological geography, one of the things I found was that across the political spectrum, from conservative to self-identified revolutionary, you had actually a series of similar interests in regard to the kind of politics that Black men actually felt they needed. But before I even get into the politics, or I could even get into the politics, one of the things I also noticed was that there was a sense among many that they hadn't actually thought about politics as something that applies to Black men. Right? Many Black men thought of it more communally. Like if you ask questions about, especially during the last presidential election, what were the needs of Black men? And of course, both candidates did so, trying to court the Black male vote. Most people talked about generic things that were related to the community as a whole, maybe some questions about criminalization, the 1994 crime bill, those kinds of dynamics. But when we started to get into more of the granular details, that we all, it was interesting to note how many Black men had not reflected upon a series of politics or potential policies that actually could work in their interest. And when they began to do so, again, across this population of 15,000, which is now over 25,000, the suggestions, the ideas, the proposals that started to come in became more and more specific, most particularly in regard to things like family court reform, in regard to things like education, particularly as it pertains to Black males who are grappling with institutional issues while being told to address these issues on individual terms and being measured on their productivity in relation to what they do as individuals, while few want to publicly discuss the barriers that they as individuals face. So as we start to talk about policy, we started to see these kinds of ideas coming through about what types of institutions would work best, what types of funding would work best, what kinds of support mechanisms would work best, what kinds of faces, what kinds of presence, what kinds of training would they want people in that are working with them to engage in, so that they could actually begin to build from where they are. What kinds of policies in regard to a new kind of New Deal would be useful for Black males who found themselves ignored in the last 50 years from specific policy. Even in the last 2 years, as we've started to see programs and grant funding institutions and so on and so forth that are coming toward the Black community, offering various options, very few have been actually targeted at Black males. So in terms of both identity formation, in terms of navigating both geographic and ideological location, what I think has become very useful is to actually generate a discussion, generate a discourse that actually allows Black men to participate, shape their identity, but at the same time challenge and attempt to redefine the structural policy, the structural nomenclature that shapes the environment and the context that they come out of, so that they can actually see a road that they can engage to actually reshape their identity, reshape their reality. And one that goes beyond generic politics, but actually specifically looks at the lives of Black males from in the womb to eldership.
Thank you, panelists. Dr. Johnson, you kind of read my mind, or you either looked over my shoulder and looked at my notes as you've kind of looked forward to where I want to take the conversation next. So first, we've started at big ideas, large ideas, concepts. Then we moved to physical space. And now I want to take the conversation to policy. And so I want to know, in what ways has the legacy effects of racist policies come up in your own work, whether it be, such as the infamous Moynihan report, some of the Dr. Johnson had alluded to the crime bill, but even also under the so-called quote unquote first Black president, Bill Clinton, and him remaking or ending welfare as we know it, end quotes. What are some of the legacy effects of racist policies, even though these, transpired years ago, whether it be not just Clinton, but also Reagan, Nixon? How has that shown up in your work today in the present?
considering I just spoke, I didn't want to necessarily go, but I'll start. Well, I can definitely say politically, one of the things that we've seen has been a legacy of policy that goes back beyond any particular president and speaks to an ongoing kind of exclusion. And one of the terms that I focus on to help me kind of examine this is anti-Black misandry. And we look at that in terms of institutional anti-Black misandry. So it's not just acts, individual acts of misandry, but more structural acts of misandry. So if we take it back to the mid 20th century, if we were talking about welfare all the way up to what, as you mentioned, Clinton, we do have to talk about the man in the house rule. We do have to talk about the impact that policy like that has, where you have families migrating during the Great Migration up to the Midwest, the East Coast, the West Coast, transitioning out of sharecropping, looking for opportunity, looking for jobs, especially when white soldiers during World War II were being, shipped overseas. And of course, Black ones were as well. But this became an opportunity for labor, possibly an opportunity to join labor unions and have some degree of protection that we've never enjoyed before. But at the same time, these families that are coming up north are finding that when they get there, in order for family to be able to get support, men can't be present. And then from there, the ongoing instability of Black male employment and what that does to the family dynamic in and of itself, from the 40s to the 70s, most particularly, as you have this insecure kind of access to stable employment for Black men, and especially by the time the soldiers get back from World War II, as a matter of fact. But even beyond that, by the time you get to the 1970s and we start to see deindustrialization take hold, those blue collar jobs that Black men moved up north to engage in become even more inaccessible. And then from there, we see the Nixon's war on drugs, where he targets the so-called hippies in the Black community, which has an adverse effect, of course, on Black men who are already insular, already unable to escape the bonds of community, because schools, if anything, the route going to college, higher education, particularly through public schools, is not necessarily as accessible for Black men as it is for other groups. So when you compound that with the loss of jobs in the late 70s, compound that with the war on drugs, we start to see a pattern where Black men are locked into limited opportunities. And so by the time we get up to some of the more contemporary policies, the more contemporary issues, many Black males are grappling with multi-generational structural anti-Black misandry, meaning that this is something that has been passed from one generation politically to another. And the limitations structurally that these males are facing, to the point where even today, the numbers are not significantly better, right? Whether we're talking about education, whether we're talking about political access. I mean, the Black male community is the most disenfranchised voting community you can have, primarily due to incarceration and the legacy of it. So even if one has come out and made something of himself, he still has to grapple with the legacy of incarceration, especially on grounds of whether or not he can even have the access to vote. So these are kind of the measures that take place. And I can go on for days, but I don't want to. I don't want to, hog the pan. But I think that's an important question, because I think it's real. I don't want to say it's only now, but it's at this juncture where the possibility of pushing a politic that isn't limited to one party, a kind of strategic pragmatism that needs to take place with Black voting. One we saw Ice Cube attempt, the rapper Ice Cube attempt to push last year, or during the presidential election, where we unroot from one political party and begin to negotiate with who's willing to work with us, and the kind of pushback that he received in the community for it. But Black men are finding themselves having to go in that direction, because at the end of the day, there's been a legacy of exclusion and underdevelopment that is baked into this very structure. So, I hope we can continue from here.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in there. I want to add to something my brilliant colleague, Dr. Johnson, just mentioned that I think is so important. And that is when you start talking about the educational legacy in this country and Black boys. And when you start talking about policy, right, and public policy and public school policy, there are ways in which Black men are imagined, where Black boys are imagined out of the educational process. And I say it that way because, one, it's more insidious than just the notion of, like, can a Black boy go to school? Can a Black boy, enter a classroom? Well, of course. But that's different than, do we in this country have an imaginative space wherein Black boys bloom and develop educationally and intellectually? It seems as if the intellectual development of Black boys in this country is always an exception. It's always something outside of what most quote unquote Black boys do. You know, we still have this notion that Black boys are disproportionately represented in behavioral classes, in study halls, etc. But part of the reason, again, is because we have not yet gotten to a place as a country whereby part of our imagination of ourselves as a nation, part of our understanding, part of our national identity is for Black men to be part of its educational wealth. And I'm saying without that, there are policy structures, there are structural dynamics that inhibit Black boys from moving forward. Even something as simple, though I think it's very complex, as how many Black male teachers is the average Black boy going to have before he leaves public school? How many Black intellectuals will he actually rub shoulders with? How many Black scholars are actually part of his inner circle? And how many of those scholars actually nurture him? See, that's it's so critically important. A friend and I were talking the other day about not just Black boys reading, but how many Black boys are actually read to by Black men. And these kinds of things mean absolutely everything when you start talking about policies and structures that help or hinder a Black boy's intellectual development. And so one of the things I would really love for us to do is to press the boundaries, right, of what we mean by Black boy, what we mean by Black man in terms of their intellectual and even their emotional development, and to understand that it must be part of the way we imagine the greatness of this nation.
My two colleagues are the powerful responses. And I think I would just like to add, as we close this question up, is that I see the implications of policy, the ways in which Dr. Johnson and Dr. Black have talked about it, obviously from a psychological lens in treatment, in treating families, Black families, and treating Black boys and treating Black men. And to me, the ways in which I have observed it is the ways in which Black boys and men understand or have a sense of power, their connection to their family, their feelings around their capacity to negotiate for themselves. And that negotiation happens both vocationally, Dr. Black was just talking about educationally, and then of course in relational context. And of course that relational context, there are multiple relational contexts in which Black boys and Black men find themselves. And of course, on the it definitely impacts, as I see it, the impact on family dynamics. What does it mean to be a Black male in the home? What are the expectations of a Black male father? What are the expectations of a Black a male husband? Are those expectations by partners of Black men, are they reasonable? Are they in step with the economic and political landscape that is actually happening currently within the United States? Often Black couples, they don't consider those things. They just come into therapy talking about how this partner or how my husband or my partner is not meeting these expectations. And often I do talk to them about these ecological and policy, intergenerational policies that are immensely impacting what is happening between them in the moment, that sometimes shifts the ways in which they think about their own dynamics. So I think that those are some of the ways. I also think, going back to Dr. Black's comment around education, that this public policy issue, as I see it, also impacts the entrance and navigation that Black men have into academic circles. But I'm talking particularly now about school age context, because one of the biggest things that we do as psychologists is what we call psychological testing. And that psychological and emotional testing is hugely problematic on multiple levels, but its purpose is to identify, assess, observe the various psychological, cognitive, neurological issues, behavioral issues that might be impeding a child from performing academically or from quote unquote behaving in academic spaces. And so what we know as Black and Brown psychologists is that most of these tests are, of course, not normed on Black and Brown populations, or not statistically significantly normed on Black and Brown populations. And so from the jump, the ways in which these questions are set up or these measures are set up are often antithetical to the ways in which Black boys develop. Secondly, the ways in which clinicians often are observing Black boys in educational spaces or making sense or conceptualizing are often coming from a lens of whiteness that has its roots in some way in this intergenerational internalization of public policy, as you mentioned the Moynihan report as an example. And so these are some of the ways in which we see it in the medicalization of Black male behavior. Thinking about the Moynihan report, well, there is no, there's nothing that can be done. The family is all messed up. This is just how Black boys are going to be. And so as a consequence of that, how do we socially control something that will never change? And so what you saw in the early 90s, and of course it continues, is that medicalization of Black boys, where Black boys are being put on things like Ritalin and other psychotropic medications for behavior without a real nuanced interpretation and conceptualization and intervention without medicalizing, because clinicians don't have a context or understanding of these types of policies and its impact on how they're conceptualizing in the present. Lastly, I'll just say this, and Dr. Johnson talks more eloquently about this, is thinking about the Moynihan report and the relationship between that and feminist paradigms. And I think that we see how feminist paradigms have a tremendous impact on public policy or and of course public opinion as it relates to Black masculinity. And so I think that some of these types of paradigms that I have seen, along with the Moynihan reports and other public policies, set up this belief, whether it's on an unconscious level, and I think for many folks it's on a conscious level, this belief that there can be a nuanced nature of Black maleness. And so if we don't believe that Black males can be nuanced and be complex, and that they carry a complexity of who they are, then we don't have programs. We don't provide economy to Black boys and Black men, because we don't think that there's any value in doing that. So that's how I would come to that question.
Thank you. Before we open up the floor for questions, I want to kind of end on a more positive note. And I want you all to kind of, again, with your own respective research, excuse me, discuss the ways in which positive examples, ways in which, your research in terms of trying to provide visions that improve the lives of Black men. What are some of the things you all are excavating in your own work as it relates to Black fatherhood, or I would even argue Black male joy? Dr. Black talked about multiple masculinities. What are some of the potential exemplars that are coming from your work that you, as ways to kind of disrupt this narrative of Black men being pathological, things of that sort? Because we hear a lot about, Black girl magic, but what are some examples you all are finding in your own work that are possible exemplars, positive, and disrupt the narrative?
I'd like to take this question first and talk about it from two different vantage points, obviously clinically for me and research. I think that one of the joys about being a clinician is that this idea that Black men and Black boys do not have a complex reservoir of emotions, it is incompletely erroneous. Black men, I see about, from my practice, about 95% of my patient load are Black men. And that has been the case for the last 15 years. And that has proven to me over and over again that Black men, when they find a safe space and a space in which they feel that they can trust, that they are more than able to talk about the complexity of their emotions. They're more than able to more deeply explore who they are. And they are more than able to get in touch with, and I'm so glad you said that, Black joy, Black male joy. They leave sessions with an expanded capacity around possibilities. And so from my own clinical work, I see that there is Black male joy and the possibility of it. Currently, I'm on a tour called Just Heal Bro. It's a new tour that's a national tour where there are 4 of us, 2 clinicians and 2 researchers who we are going state to state within the United States, where I'm currently now in a hotel in North Carolina. We've been on the road since Tuesday for this part of the tour, where we are meeting with Black men and Black college male students all around the country, talking to them about their salient issues and their concerns. And what we are seeing from this, again, is a reconfirmation of the capacity of Black men and to think for themselves, the capacity of Black men to be curious about themselves and its relationship to others, and really using this community praxis as a way to reiterate the need for their voice to be articulated and not research about them, but for them to be at the forefront of talking about who they are in their multiple complexity. And lastly, I would like to say the other ways in which I am seeing positive things with Black men, of course, is in the research that I am conducting. Currently, I'm conducting a research on emotional intimacy, or the relationship between emotional intimacy and masculine ideology are the ways in which men understand their manhood. And what I'm seeing in the preliminary results is that there is a relationship between trust and emotional intimacy. And what that means is that Black men have the capacity, have the desire to be in emotionally intimate spaces and to have deep emotional connections if they feel that there is a level of bidirectional trust. And so to end, it's been a great opportunity to work with Black men outside of just the research context, because I get to see Black men on the ground in their most vulnerable spaces and places. And over again, what I am seeing is not only the capacity to think deeply and to feel deeply, but the desire to feel deeply and to think deeply beyond what has been stereotypically depicted about our capacity.
I think I would add something to that also, in terms of, a Black male joy, Black boy joy, if you will, right? That I think is extremely important. And let me say again, hey to my great colleagues, now that I can see their faces. What's up, brothers? How y'all doing, man? Thank y'all for being here. One of the things that I've been thinking about and doing in my research is trying to get Black boys to realize that actually, at least for probably a generation, I think, at least I argue, it's going to be the son who heals the father. Black boys have been waiting on fathers to come and heal them, for fathers to stand up and become responsible, et cetera, et cetera. It's not going to happen that way. It's going to be the son who heals the father. But here's why. Because some of the trauma that happened in this country, and I think Dr. Johnson was talking about some of this trauma earlier, and it's true, has left the fathers more debilitated than the children they birth. And I think about fathers who were born in the 30s and 40s and 50s, who worked hard, who went to work every day, who paid for houses, etc., but had no emotional training, and birthed children who held them responsible and ended up feeling very wounded because our fathers were not emotionally available. The real problem is that no one ever suggested to them, no one ever connected their heart to their responsibility. And I'm saying this to say, but education, those of us who got an education from pretty much, the 80s forward, education gives us a certain kind of agency. And education gives us a certain kind of insight that we're going to have to, it's the Sankofa reality. We're going to have to take back to our daddies and teach our fathers what it means to touch, teach our fathers what it means to love, teach our fathers what it means to kiss them. We're going to have to teach our fathers emotional responsibility. But it's not because they didn't love us. It's because no one ever attached emotional responsibility to their job description in terms of Black fatherhood. And I think this is important because right now, in so many instances, we have a disproportionate number of Black boys who are disconnected, who are wounded, who are separated from their fathers, and they want them badly. But the fathers don't know what to do, and the sons are too angry to move. And I'm one who believes that if we can get not the father, if we can get the son, because the sons don't have the historical baggage that daddy has, and the sons very often have more in their intellectual arsenal sometimes than daddy might. But it would serve us to press these sons to say, hey, listen, this time it will be you who does the healing if a healing can occur. It's a transformational kind of moment. I think it's a dangerous moment, but I think it must be done.
Well, as I think about this question of Black boy joy, Black male happiness, I think of the two groups that I do work with, one of which I haven't been able to work with as much due to the pandemic this last couple of years, but based on a group that I started at Fresno State for the college students there, for Black male college students there, the Onyx Black Male Collective, I noticed a similar type of access to a joy we didn't expect as the second group I work with, who tend to be older men over 30 who are dealing with the legacy of having been sexually assaulted under the age of 18 and grappling with what that means and making sense of it. And one of the ways that I've noticed a particular type of joy is the kind of freeness that comes with concepts and terms in Black male studies that help us to examine and understand the Black male experience from vantage points we hadn't considered. So, for example, when we talk about fatherhood, and I appreciate Dr. Black introducing this aspect of it, the social expectations on fatherhood over different periods of time. You talk about my grandfather's generation, they weren't asked to be emotionally present. Their job, as they were told, was to provide. And that was the rule, that was the measure that their manhood was established against. But all of a sudden, by the time you transition into the 70s and the 80s, you now have this language about emotional presence to generations of men that was never the requirement. And more so, they were never trained on how to demonstrate that. So then you have my generation, younger men who are growing up watching TV, watching films, even listening to daytime talk shows with psychologists who are talking about the value of it, but never having received it, and blaming the father while not understanding that there's been no socialization for that. So just even for that, having that discussion there with a population of college-age men or a population of older men who've gone through certain types of experiences, the kind of joy that I've witnessed come about from the realization that these things are not individual problems that they have that are separate from everybody else. They come out of a social context that is bigger than just their individual experience. Concepts like John Henryism is one of the things I talk to both groups about, the ways in which we've been trained to work, to prioritize sacrifice, to prioritize, and it is a form of protection we provide to loved ones, but to do so until your body breaks down, until death in many instances. It's one of the reasons that Black males have the lowest life expectancy rate when you talk about it across race and gender. We were told and taught that our value, our social value, was in what we could produce for those around us, even to the extent that we lost our lives. It's one of the reasons you find Black men working in some of these death professions, like anything from, military to police, to firemen, so on and so forth. That was part and parcel to how we were trained, and without any reflection on self-care. That wasn't even a part of our framework, right? The framework was, what could you produce? And so that becomes a point of liberation of sorts, to have men even understand the type of socialization they've had, and be able to question the boundaries of it and whether or not to maintain it. The last one is a concept I've developed in the last year or so. I started to talk to men about what I call men's relationship emotional labor. And this has to do with the kinds of social expectations on men to provide not only emotional presence, but sacrifice for others on emotional grounds in relationships. And this extends beyond just individual intimate relationships. You can even talk about it on a social level or socio-political level, in terms of the roles that we play in other people's sense of security. It's an extension of the protection mechanism that men are socially expected to provide. But again, providing that type of sacrifice without having been taught how to do it, without having been taught how to protect yourself and your inner beingness while doing it, not being taught that there needs to be boundaries to service, boundaries at the very least that go into self-preservation, survival, so on and so forth. Not being taught any of those mechanisms, but still having the social expectation of providing this for others. When men come into contact with this kind of information that helps us to explore why we've been taught what we've been taught, why we're expected to do what we've been doing, and whether or not we can abstain. We can abstain, we can pause, we can actually develop mechanisms for survival beyond what we've been taught. That in and of itself is a kind of liberation that I've noticed, and it produces a kind of joy that I've seen even in perfect strangers. So when I started doing my show on YouTube and talking about these concepts, now I do it pretty much 5 days a week. The responses I get from Black men all around the world are astonishing, because these are not things that we've been taught to think about.
I would just add to Dr. Johnson, that's very powerful. And I am seeing many of the same things in clinical work, whether it's individual or with couples. And to add on to what he was saying, not just the pause and stop, but this goes back to even Dr. Black's original statement in the beginning about new modes of thinking about manhood. Even the notion that I don't have to do it at all, and that I can choose another route of thinking about service, or another route of thinking about the way in which I want to enact my masculinity. You know, oftentimes in therapy with Black couples, this comes up all the time. And sometimes I have to help Black male partners to really hear what is being said, resummarizing. But most of the time, after a resummary happens, Black males over and over ask this question: you mean I don't have to do it? You mean I can abstain? You mean I can have a different perspective? And it is, yes, you don't have to be guilted. You don't have to perpetuate these modes of John Henryism that Dr. Johnson is talking about, of this emotional labor that Black men often encounter from an intergenerational perspective. But of course, currently that they don't, that it's just the expectation that they should, as virtue of what it means to be a man. So I think that that is joyful, that is liberating, and it is decolonizing as well.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And now I want to open up the floor for questions, comments from our audience.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Thanks. Ted Maslin, the Williamsburg City Council. Question I had was, when you're mentoring students, which employment sectors or organizations do you tend to recommend for them to thrive? Or conversely, what areas do you recommend to challenge students to actually be trailblazers?
I'll take it. I don't typically recommend any particular avenue that a young man can take. What I generally do, and what I try to do most importantly, is to get a young brother to be honest with himself and his heart in terms of what excites his soul. Like, what is it that really feeds you? What is it that really makes you happy? And that can seem simple, but it's really not, because most of them have been socialized in such limiting ways that for them to sit and decide, like, what is it that I really love, that really brings me joy? Ironically, probably half of them start out with, I don't know. I don't have the slightest idea. And so helping them to get focused and helping them to discover something that actually feeds their spirit is really the biggest chunk of the mentoring process. Very often, I find, at a HBCU in Atlanta, I find that these Black boys have come to college primarily because nobody knew what else to do with them. Most of them know, I don't dream about being a college professor. No, I don't dream about being a lawyer. No, I haven't spent all my life wanting to be a doctor. I don't want to play in the NBA. Then, of course, my question is, what do you want to do? And most of them tell me, Dr. Black, I don't know. I don't know. And so part of the fun and part of the unbelievable work, right, is helping them tease through and, quite frankly, presenting them options they've never considered. Sometimes I'll say, well, can you sing? And they're like, what? But see, this is important because as a Black boy, do people present art before a Black boy as part of the dream of what you could do with your life force? Right? Very often, no, they don't. Not unless a boy's already artistic himself, right? But this is important because remember, historically, before probably the 70s, we didn't associate the arts with drama. We didn't associate the arts with femininity as Black people. Most of our art, most of our teachers, most of our singers were cisgendered heterosexual men, right? And so there's lots of work to be done here, but put simply, teasing through and presenting before mentees options they've never considered and helping them to believe that as Black boys, they have the right to be anything they choose is probably the most difficult work.
Yeah, I would add to that, Dr. Black. That's very powerful. I remember I had a Black male patient about 6 months ago, and I asked him in our work, it had been like 6 months in our work, what would you be if you could be anything besides the engineer that you are now? And you know what he said? A ballerina. And he laughed. And I said, are you just, being funny? He says, no, I was very interested in the arts, but my mother and father told me absolutely not. There's no money to be made in that. What does a little boy need to do or be involved with dancing? And so I think that a big part of mentorship to me and in my work has been on some level reparenting, or as I call it, older brothering for many of my Black males, and really helping them really think about, as you've talked about, expanding their possibilities, opening up new ways of being curious about themselves and about the world. But I also want to just push back a little bit because I think that words are psychological. And so the questioner asked about trailblazing. And I just want to be careful because for me in my work, that sort of brought up the Obama effect. That Black men don't have to trailblaze. Black men can just be. And that's a big piece of, to me, what's connected to the John Henryism and this idea of being the exceptional one, that why does a Black man have to trailblaze? And I know it probably wasn't meant from that perspective, but I think words are psychological and that they internalize or perpetuate these notions that in order for Black men or Black boys to be regarded, they in some way have to be exceptional for us for us to view them or for us to not see them as invisible. So I often tell Black men and Black boys, do what, as you talked about Dr. Black, do what your heart is ringing toward, do what you are drawn toward, but not to perpetuate these older, antiquated notions of masculinity that are rooted in competition, comparing yourself with other men, that are rooted in capitalism, but you can just be, and whatever that is, you can support that.
That's right, brother. That's right.
We have a question.
Can I answer that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, here's the thing. When we talk about trailblazing, by the time the students, the Black male students we're talking about come to get to me, you know what I mean, at the 4-year level, they're already trailblazing. And the reason I say that is because here in the California State University system of over 20 campuses, 70% of Black males drop out by their first year. Nationally speaking, about 36% of Black men graduate with a degree after 6 years. So by the time they get to a campus, they're already trailblazing, but many of them are still first generation. Many of them don't have a support mechanism. Many of them are not coming from families that understand the college experience. So they're still dealing with and helping family or grappling with issues that kind of work against their studies. So I don't get to really have conversations to any great extent about what major or potential career they can go into, because I'm dealing with basics. Like right now, I'm still teaching from home, and the majority of my Black students are on their phones trying to stay in a Zoom session while others are operating from computers. So as you know, the phones are going in and out, so on and so. So we're talking about the economic aspects of how they're navigating their college experiences, and they tend to be behind. So they're grappling with different sets of issues. The other thing to mention too, in terms of Black males, is how these institutions conceptualize them. I've been teaching my Black male studies course for about a decade now. The very first class that I taught, before I walked in the room, when I approached the building, there were 2 people standing outside. My students were in the room, but there were 2 people standing outside. One was a military recruiter that wanted to recruit my Black male students. And mind you, I didn't even know how many I had. It was the first day of class. He wanted to come in, and before I gave my first lecture, he wanted to do a presentation to try and, get as many of them out of college and into the military as possible. The second person standing out there was a detective who was looking for somebody that had robbed a liquor store a couple of nights prior. And he wanted me to go in and give him the nod if this student was in the room. Now, I'd never met either one of these gentlemen, right? But the perception of these Black males, like just the mention of a Black male studies class, already invited people that had their own ideas about Black manhood and what they wanted from it, whether it was military service or whether it had to do with going to prison. And these are coming from Black males who were in the academy already and had supposedly made it out. You know what I mean? So when we talk about this notion of, how do we navigate them? How do we mentor them? We're often dealing, and this is the kind of Black tax that comes with being an administrator or a professor. If you're on a campus of some sort, you got to do extra work because you're dealing with students that are coming out of environments that are not necessarily conducive to what they're trying to do now. And yet they still got to deal with the antipathy of the campus, the frustrating kind of engagements that take place institutionally that nobody else is aware of, right? People don't think about, but they do, right? So what is that like to come into a Black male studies class and have someone come in and tell you that somebody's about to get arrested on the very first day of class in front of everybody in broad daylight, while at the same time the military recruiter wants to take you out of college and take you somewhere else? These are the dynamics. So it's a different terrain from what I get to deal with in terms of career choice.
Thank you so much. We got a bunch of amazing questions in the chat. I'm not sure we'll be able to get to all of them, but I definitely want to touch on one that I think resonates much with this last question. And so it comes from Danny Banks Sr. He writes, "I've met a lot of Black boys who shy away, excelling for fear they will be ridiculed at school for thinking they are better than them. How do we deal with smart Black kids or teens who don't want to be smart because it's uncool?"
I'm gonna jump in. I was just trying to give my colleagues time because I don't want to hog the microphone here. But there are 2 things I'll say about this. I have to be honest, and again, I've been teaching. This is my 30th year, and I have not found that Black boys don't think it's cool to be smart. I'm gonna tell you what I have found, though. I have found that socially and culturally, there's a certain way that we perceive intelligence, and there's a certain way that we limit and lock in the performance of intelligence that I think clashes with what most Black boys understand to be kind of Black male identity, right? For example, I met a football player the other day who told me that he plays the violin, right? And people were like, oh my gosh, you play the violin? My goodness. Lots of people play the violin, don't you there? What people were so shocked about is that a football player could play the violin. In other words, we never put those two narratives, we never put those two skills generally in the same body. But what does that also generally mean? Then generally, if a football player wanted to play the violin, more than likely over time, he's either been encouraged away from it or culturally been convinced that playing football is far more valuable. And I'm saying this to say that Black men know the value of being smart. Young Black boys know the value of what it means to be intelligent. But see, even this question of what it means to be smart and to be declared smart, see, all of this is a Western construct that, and what comes along with it is often negative things in terms of a person's behavior. So I'm led to believe that really the issue is how much the Black community hates arrogance more than the issue of the intelligence. Because I think intelligence has always been a value among our people. But I do think culturally that we have a unspoken penchant against the performance of ego and the performance of arrogance. So I'd stop there.
Yeah, I would have to agree in terms of the types of contexts that I've been in. I haven't seen the questioner's phenomenon exactly like that. What I have seen, having taught in white spaces and now teaching in an HBCU, first at Morehouse and now at Norfolk State University, is a plethora of different ways in which, back to Dr. Black's comment, in which intelligence gets manifested by Black males. And what I'm seeing at Norfolk State, germane to your question, is not Black male students' fear around their intelligence or feeling that they can't be intelligent, but going back into their communities and navigating what they've been exposed to and making sense of that in context to going back into their communities and seeing poverty, how to negotiate that, how to navigate relationships, what, with this new knowledge that I have, how do I talk to other brothers who I think could benefit without being, as Dr. Black is talking about, arrogant? So how do I lower the gap? How do I use what I have to be beneficial to my community when they may not understand the context or the language, or may not even understand my motivation based on their own subjectivity? Secondly, what I've heard that's close or germane to your question is Black males. This comes up around intelligence in terms of the comparison to other white male students or white students in general. The fear and the shame and the anxiety and often rage of having to be suspected as not intelligent by their white professors or white peers, by microaggressive comments or microaggressive behaviors of professors, or being invalidated or ignored in classrooms. And they have taken that to be a sign that there is a perception that their Black maleness is, first of all, not welcomed into those spaces, but also that those white peers or white professors don't even think that they deserve to be in those spaces because they don't have the same intellectual prowess as perhaps their white colleagues do have. So I often hear that in therapy and even with students when I was teaching in PWIs, that it's rough to be in these spaces because over and over again, I am met with hostility from folks that don't look like me around who I am.
One of the things that I noticed is that when it comes to mentoring or when it comes to parenting, I see the same kinds of things in terms of what Black males, young Black males, tend to need, and that is, without question, modeling. They need to be able to see it As a father, I can tell you, this session started at 6 a.m. California time. And so I'm also getting my son up to go to school, you know what I mean? And pushing him out the door. But part of what I try to do with him is let him see me, not only reading and engaging in matters that deal with, what we associate with intelligence, but also having books around, normalizing these kind of things in such a manner that he doesn't have to negotiate whether or not to be intelligent in certain spaces. He assumes that he's going to take up the room in the space to be who he is and allow that to be, because that's all he's seen modeled. I mean, we come from environments where in the K through 12 system, we're seeing in terms of school psychologists, women outnumber men by over 600%. So what does that do, particularly for Black boys that don't get to see that specific type of intelligence model? What happens when 2% of teachers are Black males? What impact does that have on the students, especially when there are studies to suggest that girls tend to perform better grade-wise under female teachers, boys tend to perform better grade-wise under male teachers. But if you're a Black male and you haven't seen a Black male teacher, what does that do? I didn't run into one until my junior year of college, right? So these kinds of dynamics end up having an impact on performance, on self-perception, even on confidence and ability. And these are the kind of things we have to push back on and find ways to engage them. Modeling becomes extremely important as far as that's concerned, to really kind of push the needle and demonstrate that it is okay to fully be who you are, fully engage your interests, and assume their value simply because you value them.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for a rich and robust conversation. We are out of time. However, I'm going to be justifiably selfish and ask each of you all to recommend one book, must-read book. Anyone who's interested in this topic, what book would you recommend they read?
Well, I have to go back to the beginning of this session. The first book that I recommend, especially in regard to Black male studies, is Tommy Curry's The Man Not. That is the starting point for me in terms of what I recommend. And that has been incredibly fruitful in terms of the student response and, the people's response in general to understanding the particularities of the Black male experience beyond just the kind of surface level optics, but getting into the granular areas about what it means to be men, what it means to be Black, what that intersection of concepts means, and how it pushes back against assumptions about Black manhood. So that would be my starting point.
I would, first of all, before going to books, recommend each of my brothers who are on the panel, their articles, book chapters, and other publications that they have written. They are excellent writers on these topics, and of course you would benefit. But the book that I often use in my psychology of Black masculinity course, in addition to The Man Not, is Progressive Black Masculinities, which was edited by Anita Muta, M-U-T-U-A. And it's an edited volume where different researchers, clinicians from different backgrounds are talking about Black masculinity from multiple perspectives. And I think from religion to spirituality, to education, to psychology. And so I think it's a good book, a good foundation to begin to think about Black masculinity, not just from one lens, but from multiple lenses. And the center of the book is really rooted in the supposition of the book is really rooted in how do we, regardless of our discipline, present and enact a new paradigm of Black masculinity that is useful for the salient issues that Black boys and Black men are encountering in this dispensation.
Dr. Black.
As a literary man, I too like The Man Not, but I have to admit, as a literary man, the book I think we all should read is by Ernest Gaines, A Lesson Before Dying. That's the one I would ask every person to read. I think it plays with ideas of manhood, masculinity, Black culture, Black spirituality, how masculinity is perpetuated, the way women participate in masculinity, etc., and how masculinity even negotiates with death. So yes, that's the one I would choose, A Lesson Before Dying.
Thank you so much for a rich, robust conversation, as well as a way to start our 12th symposium with the Lemon Project. As a reminder, we can continue this conversation after this Zoom meeting in the webinar. The contact information is in the chat. And with that, I just want to thank you all so much, those in present, as well as my panel members. Thank you so much. I've learned so much.
Facilitating for moderating this session. Again, thank you, Dr. Daniel Black. Thank you, Dr. T. Hassan Johnson, Dr. O'Shane Gadsen. This has been a spectacular, I think I'm in the camera here, conversation. Also, I want to note that the books for our speakers, some of our speakers will be available. Are they available now? Will they be available? So tonight, you will have the opportunity to purchase the books of our guest speakers. Again, thanks to our Zoom participants for joining us. We're going to head to the webinar, and then I believe we have something else on our agenda at 10:30. The provost is to, okay, so she's not, okay. So, so we will switch over to the meeting, okay. Again, thank you all for joining us, and thanks again, Dr. Donnor and Dr. Allen. Would you like to take it from here? We're going off Zoom. Okay. All right.